Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. And this week on the show, we've got the Illuminati Freemasons. I'm Patrick Ryan, joined by Dennis Cheney. Hi, Dennis.
Hello, Patrick.
We can actually see each other again.
I know.
Still not in the same room, but it's getting closer.
No, it's feeling more and more like human contact, and I'm pumped to be doing this. We're moving more and more towards video and human connection. Maybe someday we'll be in the same room.
One can hope. One can hope.
I feel every episode. Oh man.
Well, it's so weird because we used to do so much stuff all the time. Yeah.
Together. I know. Yeah, I know.
And we're always very against podcasting through Skype. And yeah.
But it's the new world. I mean,
and then 2020 was like, guess what, guys? It's happening.
I mean, you're quarantining, and I know you've offered to do stuff together, but I just refuse to give up my God-given right of licking doorknobs, man. So as long as you have a prejudice against that, we're just not going to do things in person.
I do, but I respect your right to lick the doorknobs in your house. So it's fine. It's fine. But you're not coming over here and licking doorknobs over here. So that's really where our divide stands.
Yep.
So this is going to be a follow-up episode, kind of what we were talking about a couple weeks ago. I did an introduction to the American Freemasons and Albert Pike and a little bit of background on them. And I wanted to do kind of a multi-parter because there's just so much stuff about the Freemasons, and most of it they wrote themselves. Like, that's the best part about most of this evidence. It's like, it's not even that refutable because it came from their printing presses, a lot of it. Like, at some point we're going to dig into just some of the books that they printed and the weird things that they wrote.
Yeah, I feel like this is a gold mine.
Really. It really is. Like, for a group that claims not to be a cult, they talk about Lucifer a lot and worshiping him and him being the good guy. And I'm just like, that's kind of Satan worship. Well, it's not. We worship Lucifer. I'm like, it's kind of splitting hair, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, at a certain point. I mean, if you think about, like, any cult or any paganism or even anything in the Bible, like the golden calf or anything like that, nobody ever thinks they're the bad guy.
Well, no, they see Lucifer as the good guy, and he's an equal god to Yahweh.
Right.
Or God.
Right. But that's not an excuse. I mean, like, if you ask the people at the foot of Mount Sinai, why are you worshiping a golden calf? They wouldn't say, because we're evil. We like evil. They'd say, well, this is actually a symbol of, fruitfulness and food and stuff, because we're stuck out in the desert. Like, there's always a reason why people worship Satan. Yeah. I mean, so it's funny that they tried to, based on your last episode that everyone should listen to about Albert Pike, it's funny that Satanists and stuff and pagans, they witches or whatever, they always use the excuse of, well, it's not actually bad. I actually care about good things. It's like, well, everyone cares about good things. It's that you're worshiping an evil entity. So, Yeah. Yeah.
And we'd kind of touched on with Albert Pike, his connection with American Illuminati, and that they are actually discussed in Freemason writing. And we'd kind of talked a little bit about, like, which came first, who influenced who. And that's kind of what I wanted to delve into a little bit more this week. But if you didn't listen a couple weeks ago, I strongly suggest you go back and listen to that episode. It was really good. But a lot of information about Freemasonry starting up in the U.S. But you don't necessarily have to listen to that to understand this.
Cool.
But if you don't know anything about the Freemasons, it's a good place to start. So we're going to get into the Illuminati this week. So the Bavarian Illuminati was founded by Adam Weishaupt in 1776. Which is a pretty important year. Just a lot of stuff happened in the 1770s in general that was very revolutionary.
That's the exact year we did the Declaration of Independence. Was he associated with any of that?
We're gonna kind of get
Okay.
into maybe how things weave through it. He wasn't directly involved. He's not an American. He's Bavarian,
Right.
and he's not in the U.S. He's in Europe.
You
Uh,
know that you know that there's a famous Bavarian general who helped us win the Revolutionary War, right?
I did not know that.
Yeah, we'll get okay. I'll bring that up later.
Okay.
All right.
So the following year, in 1777, Weishaupt was initiated as a Freemason at the Deluge Theodor vom Gutenrat in Munich. So he wasn't necessarily involved with the Masons and what was going on in the US at the time. He wasn't quite there yet. But he soon realized the potential of Masonic lodges as recruiting grounds for his own secret society and directed members of his order to begin illuminating Freemasonic lodges throughout Germany and later Europe. So we're not going to delve way back into where the Illuminati actually started. We're going to pick up right where they kind of start colliding with the Freemasons.
Okay.
Because that's another thing, like we have to get into Knights Templar to really kind of get into where the Illuminati's coming from and possibly some connection to the Freemasons, which dates back even farther. But that will be something that we probably go into at some point because they
I
stem
said
off into so many different things.
I would say this Adam Weishaupt guy is a real go-getter. He's part of one plan to rule the world, and then he's like, you know what I need to do is take over the other plan to rule the world.
Well, from the question we had a couple of weeks ago was, were the Masons always this kind of occult world domination thing, or was this the Illuminati coming into that? And
That was my
previous
question, yeah.
previous to this, the Illuminati was already kind of known as like a conspiracy group that wanted to take over the world. Like they were already around, and again, we can go back further than that, but we're just going to get with where they collide here.
The name is interesting too because it kind of collides with the whole Satan the Lightbringer thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so like I said, he realized that he could like use the lodges to push the Illuminati. So he starts recruiting throughout Germany and then later on Europe. After the dissolution of the Masonic rites of strict observance at the 1782 Masonic Congress at Wilhelmsbad, Weishaupt and Baron von Nigge were shrewdly able to snatch up strict observance members and increased membership in the Bavarian Illuminati to around 3,000 members. So they start recruiting hard over that like 5 years or so, to the point where they get up to the high levels in the Freemasons, which is the strict order, which is kind of, we talked about that a little bit a couple weeks ago. That's like the higher ups.
Mm-hmm.
So the Illuminati. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say the Illuminati soon illuminated lodges in France, Italy, Sweden, Belgium, Holland, Denmark, Poland, and Hungary as well. Again, all over the next just few years. Like it happens really quick. Like the late 70s into the early 80s, they went hard at taking over the Freemasons.
Wow. That what I was going to say earlier was I find it interesting that you said it was after the dissolution of the Masonic rite of strict observance. It sounds like the Masons like loosen their rules.
Yes.
And the Illuminati were like, no, like we're gonna go hardcore here. It sounds like this is kind of it raises the question of if the Masons have kind of been a degrading version of the Illuminati, and the Illuminati are almost like we're sticking with the original mission. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know, and I kind of went back and forth on that, and I debated kind of going in that direction with this historically. It's just kind of hard to prove or really find strong accounts. You can kind of find arguments both ways on where the Masons really kind of bent on like world domination at this point.
But the Illuminati were. That's
yes.
What it sounds like. Okay.
Yes, they've kind of always been about we're going to get into kind of what they want to do.
Well, it sounds like all domination things, I guess is my point. It sounds like they're trying to recruit people who wanted things to be the old way.
Kind of. Okay, so the Illuminati is an anti-clerical, anti-monarchical doctrine of the Bavarians and other revolutionaries, and they influenced the events that led up to the French Revolution. So they're all about like overthrowing governments, overthrowing religion.
Right.
Like it's in this period of enlightenment where all this stuff's kind of getting pushed aside. And these are kind of like the revolutionaries pushing for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm starting to distrust the word enlightenment, knowing all the terms we've you learn about the Enlightenment in high school, and it's like now I'm starting to feel like that might be a Luciferian. Like, what's going on here? We associate it with science and democracy, but it's like
we're enlightening the mind. But yes, it kind of has, like a lot of things with the Freemasons, double meanings.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1785, an Italian adventurer, Count Alessandro Cagliostro, appeared in Paris. The Count earned a reputation as an esoteric Freemason and wonder worker who was expelled from England and Russia for fraud. So, kind of a snake oil salesman. I'm assuming he's kind of got some like magic tricks.
Right.
Like he can do some weird stuff, sleight of hand, but it looks like he's, like performing miracles almost.
Right. Yeah. That's also something they always say in old school text about people like that. They said they appeared. Yeah. They just showed up, like they're basically scam artists. So
yeah, they're moving from country to country.
Right.
Town to town, whatever. So Cagliostro had visited Germany in 1777, right after the founding of the Illuminati. So that's where it kind of gets confusing, because there's accounts of like the Illuminati morphing from things, but then by all accounts, like they appear hardcore in 1776. Which is kind of their whole thing, is they're very mysterious. They don't like people to know things about them.
Right.
And as we move through this, you're going to find they talk about the fact that they want to be in the shadows until their master purpose comes to fruition. They don't want people to think about them.
Yeah. Oh, man. The more we talk about this stuff, the more I become, because I consider myself a patriot, I just become oddly disturbed about the dates and the people and everything that lines up with 1776.
Yep.
It just, yeah. And back then, that's the perfect time to form an actual secret society. I mean, you didn't have the internet.
Well, it was happening a lot, especially in Europe, which is where this has happened. I mean, there's a lot of build up to the French Revolution, and it's just everybody's sick of the monarchy there, and just in this oppressive government.
But we all know, I mean, that was the bloodiest revolution. They just executed people just right and left.
Oh, yeah. We're going to get into that.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep going.
So Cagliostro met Weishaupt, and like Weishaupt, was initiated into something called the strict observance of the Masonic Rite. At his later trial in Rome, Cagliostro claimed to be an Illuminati and a Knight Templar. In Paris, Cagliostro created a new Masonic rite, the Egyptian, which he touted to be true Freemasonry. So Freemasons have been around for at least several hundred years at this point. This guy shows up, gets initiated, calls himself Illuminati, and he's like, all right, I know what real Freemasons are.
You had brought up the Egyptians in the last episode.
Yep. And this is kind of, I'm going to tie a lot of stuff in from the last episode into this, and it's kind of, I think, going to help a lot of stuff there make more sense too. And who was behind it and all that. So it later became, the Egyptian rite eventually became the rite of the Memphis Mizram, which attracted radical and nonconformists across Europe. Cagliostro and his Egyptian rite became all the rage and even admitted women. So that's kind of the offshoot from the Masons and everybody else, is they're cool with women being involved.
Huh, okay.
He also became friends with the Duke of Orleans and other prominent Freemasons at the time. So, but Cagliostro wasn't friendly with everybody. He was making enemies as well. He had been implicated unjustly in the affair of the diamond necklace, which was a whole scandal with Marie Antoinette, which we could get into that, but that's just kind of a weird side story about stuff that was going on with the monarchy at the time.
You know what? Maybe next episode I'm doing the affair of the diamond necklace.
It's actually kind of an interesting story. It just would have taken up too much time and all this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really play into the Freemasons of the Illuminati other than Cagliostro is involved.
It was just a news event of the time that they inserted themselves into.
And you're going to find Cagliostro, he was involved in so much stuff. Like, he became very notorious kind of at the time, like much like Weishaupt was. So, basically what you need to know is the affair of the diamond necklace was kind of a preface to the French Revolution. It was kind of gearing things up for that. It was a con game that targeted the queen, as I said. She was actually innocent, but it generated a scandal of bad press that just hurt the monarchy even more. So in 1786, Cagliostro ended up in jail in the Bastille. Demonstrations organized by his Masonic supporters eventually secured his release. Cagliostro later wrote an open letter to the French people, urging them to mount a peaceful revolution and destroy the Bastille.
History's original, mostly peaceful protest.
Yeah.
Organize a peaceful revolution and tear down the police station.
Basically.
Literally what he's saying.
Yep. So the Duke of Orleans and Desmoulins were following Cagliostro's instructions when they targeted the old fortress in 1789. So it happened.
Yeah. That's the same year that we became a country, by the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff happening. It was a very just turbulent time across the world. So Cagliostro's fatal mistake, though, was returning to Italy and trying to set up a Masonic lodge in Rome. The Vatican caught him, and he lived out his last years in prison.
Good for them.
It was a very gutsy move to go like
to the
right
Vatican.
there where the Pope is.
I know. Good for the Vatican, taking them down.
So I don't know if you're aware. Do you know what a Jacobin is?
No. I'm gonna say no. I know the word, but I don't know what it means.
It's a term from this period of time, the late 1780s. A Jacobin was a member of the Jacobin Club, a revolutionary political movement that was the most famous political club during the French Revolution. The club was so called because of the Dominican convert in Paris in the Rue Saint-Jacques, where they originally met. Today,
the Dominican convent.
Oh, the Dominican convent. What did I say?
You said convert, but no, that's interesting that they met basically at a secluded. Were they priests?
I don't believe so. That I'm not sure. I didn't follow up.
A convent can also be nuns. That's really weird.
So I don't. You're right. The meeting there as a group, they might have been. Let me see. I don't. Okay. Today, the term Jacobin and Jacobinism are used in a variety of senses. In France, Jacobin now generally indicates a supporter of a centralized republican state and strong central government powers, and or supporters of extensive government intervention to transform society. Jacobin is sometimes used in the UK as a pejorative for radical left-wing revolutionary politics.
Yeah, that's how I've heard it.
Okay. So that's kind of where it's coming from. So I think you might be right. It might have been priests doing it. I don't know if I get into that, who exactly they were at the beginning. The Jacobin Reign of Terror symbolized the French Revolution in the minds of many. The inventor of the guillotine, Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotine, was a Freemason and a member of the Nine Sisters Lodge and a Jacobin.
Can you imagine? Okay, first of all, imagine that I invented a weapon that was like the most terrible weapon you'd ever seen, and you say, "What do you name it?" I'm like, "The Dennis." What kind of psychopath?
Well, it'd be the Cheney.
Yeah, but to name a weapon, that'd be like, hey, this is my machine gun. What do you call it? It's called the Cheney. Like, do the most terrifying thing to hear a person.
It happens a lot though with stuff like that.
Yeah, I know.
People name it after themselves, or they get.
I'm mostly just joking, but it is kind of scary to call a gun by yourself.
Well, you got to. I think he wants notoriety at that point because they're not wanting to use it as a means for like killing commoners. He's inventing it to like overthrow people.
Yeah, for real.
So the Jacobin had their roots in a secret association of politicians from Brittany. Those men shared membership and ideology with quasi-secret societies that sprouted like mushrooms in the revolutionary ferment, including the so-called Society of 30 and the ultra-radical Club des Cordeliers. So the Jacobians finally got their name when they set up shop in an old Dominican monastery in Paris. Okay, here's what it is. The Dominican monks had called Jacobins because they were associated with the Church of St. Jacques. So they're either members or the church is like sympathizing with them.
Okay.
The name Jacques also belonged to the Grand Master of the infamous Knights Templar, Jacques de la Molle, or de Molay, sorry. De Molay was put to death through a conspiracy of the French crown and the Catholic Church in the 14th century. Later, de Molay and the Knights Templar were adopted as martyrs by many Freemasons. Some suspected the Jacobins' hostility to the king and church were part of a long-cherished secret plan of revenge. One of those was publisher Nicolas Bonneville, who was himself a Jacobin. Radical Jacobins were obsessed with de-Christianizing French society, replacing the Catholic Church with a cult of reason or a cult of the supreme being.
Wow.
So many Jacobins were Freemasons, like I've already kind of talked about a little bit. The Duke of Orleans, the Duke of Desmoulins, Count Mirabeau, and Jean Paul Marat, to name a few. The bloodiest of the lot, Maximilien Robespierre, a champion of the cult of the Supreme Being, who presided over the terror, was perhaps a Masonic brother. Jacobins were split by bitter ideological and personal rivalries, though. The two main factions were the relatively moderate Girondins and the more radical Montagnards. Their relationship was similar to that of the Russian Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. Robespierre was a Montagnard, a radical. When he and his faction took control in 1793, they launched a purge of the Girondins. Louis Philippe, Duke of Orleans, the would-be Masonic monarch, lost his head. So did rabble-rousers Desmoulins, along with many others. So that guillotine got put to good use.
Yeah, they were all over that revolution, weren't they?
Well, they were taking out the other side of their own kind of thing.
Yeah.
So kind of a revolution within a revolution, I guess.
I mean, I guess if your goal is complete domination, you're going to...
You don't want to split hairs within the party.
No.
You're with us or you're dead.
I mean, think about this. If you're already against the church and you're against the government, then, like, what stops you from killing each other? Because you know the end game is either you all die or one of you becomes, like, supreme leader.
Yeah, so you've got to have yeah, that's true. You would have to have kind of a united front within this revolution. Otherwise, it's going to tear itself apart.
United front and the consequences for killing each other would be very minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So might as well do it now, yeah.
Yeah, do it now. That way you can, because either you're going to get killed by the church or the government, or you're going to be the supreme leader. So you might as well kill every other little mini dictator that's around you. Yeah. So
2 books appeared alleging that the French Revolution was nothing less than a Masonic conspiracy. But behind that lurked a more insidious secret society, the Bavarian Illuminati. The first book was written by a refugee French priest, a Jesuit, the Abbé Augustin Barruel, in his memoir illustrating the history of Jacobinism. Barruel argued that the French Revolution was the end result of subterranean warfare waged by secret societies to destroy the church and the monarchy. Barruel blamed Masonic philosopher Voltaire for fomenting hatred of Christianity, and Illuminati founder Adam Weishaupt for encouraging atheism.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes sense.
I mean, he's not wrong.
I know he's not.
What inspired things to happen.
The more I get into Christian thought, my own faith, and the more I get into history, the Enlightenment is kind of disturbing. They're like, you know how they say that history, like the winners write history?
Yes.
When you think about some of the lies that we're told about the Enlightenment, it's actually kind of disturbing. Like they say stuff like, well, before the Enlightenment, Christianity was destroying all the ancient philosophers and the scientific texts, and there was this dark ages and nothing was being invented.
You hear that argument a lot.
And it's all, the more you read about real history, it's all a lie. And it's like, well, then why are we being told this? And it's because a certain group of people want you to think something about the Enlightenment, and they want you to see history in that way when all these like revolutionary stuff was happening. And it's just disturbing. Maybe someday I'll piece this all together into coherent thoughts, but just the idea that kids sit in school and they open up a textbook and they get to a part called the Enlightenment, and that comes after the Dark Ages. And when you really look at history, it's like, well, that's just politicization of what happened. And there was not a time where we threw off Christianity and started inventing everything and we rediscovered philosophy. Like, that's not a real thing ever. And maybe I'll do a show on that. But yeah, I'm starting to get really suspicious of the history we're being taught, and then why that's being taught, and knowing that France, the U.S., possibly in the U.K., Russia, knowing that they all went through a phase where these people were involved in those revolutions is, it makes you question your history.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to a man named John Robinson, who was born in 1739. He was a British physicist and mathematician. He was a professor of natural philosophy, which is the precursor of natural science, and he taught at the University of Edinburgh. A member of the Edinburgh Philosophical Society when it received its royal warrant, he was appointed as the first general secretary to the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Robinson invented the siren and also worked with James Watt on an early steam car. Following the French Revolution, Robinson became disenchanted with elements of the Enlightenment. So this is a smart guy. This is a really smart guy in the time.
Right.
Now, Robinson himself, Dennis, was actually a Freemason. He was initiated. Yeah, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Based on where he is, the level of society he's at, and just the fact that he's extremely intelligent. So, he was initiated at Liège in his early life, and for some time, he was a working Freemason. The political historian Richard Hofstadter, however, commented that he was little involved, while McCoy's Masonic Encyclopedia indicates that he was very active in the Masons. So there's, with much of these guys, and we find this with a lot of stuff outside of Freemason text, it seems like the water gets muddied on almost everybody.
Sure. It's secret society. So
yeah, exactly. And how would you know that whoever's muddying the water doesn't have some connection to the evidence that he's trying to discredit?
Right.
So Robinson uh, was sorry, his work Robinson's work was accepted in many quarters in England due to the strong anti-Jacobin sentiment then that was prevalent. A contemporary critic wrote, quote, "On the present occasion, we acknowledge that we have felt something like regret that a lecturer on natural philosophy, of whom his country is so justly proud, should produce any work of literature by which his high character for knowledge and for judgment is liable to be at all depreciated." Because here's the thing, Robinson authored a book called Proofs of Conspiracy in 1797, a polemic accusing Freemasonry of being infiltrated by Weishaupt's Order of the Illuminati. Smart guy, great career. As soon as he speaks up about the Illuminati, why would he do this? This is just going to make him look like a crazy person. And
it hurts his career.
Yep.
This is like this is the original whistleblower.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So before you go on the internet, you wrote a book about it, or pamphlets.
Yep. Before WikiLeaks. Yep.
So
then they immediately attack him. He's a well-known scientist, basically. You know, a lot of people don't know science actually started. It was called natural philosophy. Everything was philosophy back in the day. So this is the scientist, and he doesn't say anything about science. He says, "Hey, there's these guys trying to take over the world," and they say, "Well, now you just don't have any credibility." This would be like Neil deGrasse Tyson coming out and being like, "Hey, there's a conspiracy going on in the government, you know, and it's very credible." And then people saying, "Well, now we can't listen to you about physics."
Yeah, now all your physicist work is just done. So, to quote John Robinson from Proofs of a Conspiracy in 1797, "The great strength of our order lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in any way in its own name, but always covered by another name and another occupation. None is fitter than the three lower degrees of Freemasonry. The public is accustomed to it, expects little from it, and therefore takes little notice of it. Next to this, the form of a learned or literary society is best suited to our purpose, and had Freemasonry not existed, this cover would have been employed, and it may be much more than a cover. It may be a powerful engine in our hands." So that's him just basically laying out how the Illuminati feels about the Freemasons.
Yeah. And I like how specifically he says the lower levels are almost like the people in it aren't really part of the group. They're like a PR thing. It's like, look at these normal people, you know, who are in there. And we read, just to draw the curtain back a little bit, me and you read some of Albert Pike's works over the last couple of weeks.
Yes.
And his book goes level by level through the Freemasons, and it starts out very common. Literally the first level, you learn the 10 Commandments.
Yep.
And by the time you get to like level 22, it's talking about how all religions are the same, and really Jesus is not the logos. It's some wild stuff. So yeah, it's almost like they like any secret society, they even protect themselves from their own members. It's like until you get to a certain level, you don't know.
Well, and what it is, I think part of it is those lower levels are the ones that people are going to try and talk to the most, because they're going to be the most approachable. They're not going to have the lines, and they think what they're doing is innocent.
Right. And so, yeah, literally, if your own members don't know what the higher members are doing, it's both a good recruitment tool to get more people for the higher members, and also it's a tool that the general public will see normal people, the fireman, the postmaster, joining this group, and they'll think, oh, it's nothing.
Well, and the thing is, most of the like occult type information and like more conspiracy type information we have about them has over the years has come from people who detracted, like John Robinson,
right,
when they got up to higher levels and realized what was going on and went, oh, this is not what I signed up for, and this is not what I thought this was, and I need to let people know what this really is.
Right. That's why I don't hold any ill will towards people who are part of this, because And unless you get to a certain point and you know what you're doing, odds are you've just been fooled.
Yeah, you've been deceived. But if you're
right.
but when somebody presents you with the truth, if you're going to ignore it now, you're kind of complicit.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, in 1787, 2 years before the revolution exploded, Adam Weishaupt's nominal replacement as the head of the Bavarian Illuminati, Johann Baudet, made 2 trips to Paris. In Paris, Baudet formed a close relationship with the radical publisher and future Jacobin Nicolas Bonneville, who wrote an Illuminati manifesto on world revolution. Bonneville was a Freemason and friend with both the Duke of Orleans and revolutionary firebrand Camille Desmoulins. Bonneville and Desmoulins belonged to yet another secret organization, the Society of the Friends of Truth. It was described as a combination of political club, Masonic lodge, and saloon, or salon. It says salon. I think it might have meant salon. That might be a typo. I would like if it was a salon though.
You
like
know what though? I mean,
they got their wigs. Well, they used to wear a lot of wigs and stuff back then. It might actually be a salon. I'm going with it. That's not a typo.
Have you ever been to an inner city barbershop? People talk about the world. That's the equivalent of like a bar, like in the old time. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You're right. They might have been getting their wigs done, talking about stuff. It could be salon or saloon, but really they're kind of the same thing. If you know.
Yeah. So another little fun note. In 1798, Minister G.W. Snyder asked George Washington, our George Washington, if Illuminati influence was there in America. In his reply, Washington didn't doubt that the, quote, the doctrines of Illuminism and the principles of Jacobism had found their way to America. But Washington said he did not believe the lodges of Freemasons in this country, which he was a member of, had, as societies, endeavored to propagate such ideas. But he feared that some individual Masons were guilty of doing so, and he singled out the so-called Democratic Republican societies. Washington also regarded radical pamphleteer Tom Paine as one of those individuals. I know.
Hold on a second. George Washington didn't like Thomas Paine?
Well, no, he thinks
Thomas Paine is give me liberty or give me death guy.
But Thomas Paine is also believed to have been involved in the French Revolution. Like he was kind of, he did a bunch of different stuff, but one of his big things was he liked writing propaganda. Because he kind of helped spread a lot of, because he did help inspire the revolution here, but it was through these kind of what would be considered kind of propaganda writings, kind of firing people up about things. He was doing it in Europe before that.
So George Washington, this is like melting my brain a little bit.
I don't think, but yeah, he's saying that Tom Paine is one of these radicals that are the Illuminati that want to overthrow the world. Like he just wants to start stuff up. Because I think it's known that Paine was associated with the French Revolution, that he was there and he was writing stuff there. And then he comes to America like a decade later.
Well, I think the French Revolution happened after the American Revolution.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, other way around. Sorry. Yeah,
no,
right.
It's just went there. What's boggling my mind is we tend to think of the American Revolution as this one block of ideas. Like you have Thomas Paine and you have Benjamin Franklin, you have George Washington, and they're all like in one big room together, like coming up with their ideas. And then you have George Washington, the father of our country, literally saying, I don't trust these people, some of these people.
Yeah, which is a little confusing because, again, he was a member of the Masons.
Yeah, I wonder if he wasn't very high up, or maybe he just was superficially a member, or maybe this is around the time when the Masons were getting taken over by the Illuminati. Maybe he was an original Mason, and he was like, I don't like this Illuminati stuff.
That makes sense. You know what? That actually does make sense, what you just said. And that would make sense why he's now kind of not a fan of pain.
Right.
Because he may have been on board with it when he was doing it here in America, but then he goes over to France and starts kind of pulling
Yeah.
strings and levers over there with his writing. And now he's known to be involved. He thinks he's involved. He knows he's a Mason. He thinks he's involved with this Illuminati that started over there. So that's probably actually what's happening.
Yeah, I think
It's weird that I feel like there might be some good guy Freemasons now.
well, no, I think there probably would have to be just because of what we learned about how they use people and how it seems to be infiltrated at some point.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, I have a strong bias towards liking George Washington. I just, but it just seems
Well, yeah.
like it just seems like what you're describing with the infiltration, maybe, he might not be a total evangelical Catholic, or whatever Christian, but like it seems like he's not. The whole idea of the American Revolution is like we have dissolved our bonds with you. It's anti New World Order.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that based on what we learned on the last episode, where we found that Freemasons were trying to start the Spanish-American War and stuff like that, that some people might be involved in the American Revolution just to stir the pot and start a new world order, and some people like George Washington might be involved for freedom.
Yeah.
And that those two things could be at odds, and you could both be Freemasons.
Well, and I think we're finding that the farther, like, especially now that we're digging into all this now, Freemasons are a very complicated group, I think, and have kind of been swayed and turned over the years. And I think kind of what we touched on last time we talked about, the more I learn about them, I do think it was pretty innocent when it started.
I kind of have that theory too. Yeah, I kind of think it got corrupt. And I think that probably happens with every secret society, because the nature of a secret society is that the more secret, demented stuff. That's why Christianity's always been like open, right?
Yeah.
Like public revelation, everything's open, nothing's secret. Because when things get secret, you're prone to other secret groups trying to, take control and stuff. But I'm sure when it started, it might have been completely innocent. It might have been literally been a union for stonemasons that slowly became this bizarre thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, next I want to move on to a man named William Morgan, who was born in 1774. He was a resident of Batavia, New York. Now, Morgan claimed to have been made a master mason while he was living in Canada, and that he appears to have briefly attended a lodge, in Rochester. In 1825, though, Morgan received the Royal Arch degree at Leroy's Western Star Chapter number 33. Having declared under oath that he had previously received the 6 degrees that preceded it. And we're not going to get into all the weird Mason level stuff. Basically, there were some prereqs that he was supposed to take care of somewhere else that it's questionable whether he actually did. Yeah. It's never been established if he actually received these degrees from which lodge. Morgan then attempted unsuccessfully to help establish or visit lodges and chapters in Batavia, but he was denied participation by members who disapproved of his character and even questioned his claims to Masonic membership. This angered Morgan, who finally announced that he was going to publish an expose titled Illustrations of Freemasonry, critical of the Freemasons, and revealing their secret degree work in detail. That's one account.
Yeah.
That's not really the one I believe, though, based on, I'm going to give you the beginning of both stories, and then it's going to end in pretty much the same place. And you'll see why I don't think that's probably the one that's true.
Okay.
So other records claim Morgan routinely visited New York State Masonic lodges in the cities of Batavia, Leroy, and Rochester in the early 1800s, but his Masonic standing gradually came into question, and he was removed and later blackballed from membership. Rebuked, Morgan threatened to expose the Freemasons' inner secrets in his upcoming book. He further angered the local Masons by bragging about receiving a sizable advance from a local newspaper for his exposé's publication. So that's really the only difference here is one record says like he claimed all this stuff, but there's no proof he did any of it. But then he threatened to write this thing and the Masons got mad. And then there's the other one that says that he was in them and they got upset with him and blackballed him. And then he threatened to write this book and then they got mad at him. If you don't know anything about the Freemasons, why are they worried about you writing about what their secrets are? Because there's already people writing what they say is made up stuff as it is. So why is this?
Yeah, he had infiltrated them apparently, though, according to both accounts.
Well, just a little bit, though, in the first account.
Yeah, I'm with you, though. It doesn't make a lot of sense that basically a fraudster. Also, the word blackball implies that you're part of the group to begin with. You can't blackball a person who's not part of your group.
Well, yeah, in the second story where they say he's blackballed him, he's in the membership, and they grow not to like him and question him, and then they remove him.
Well, I think it depends on what. I'll say this: I'll reserve my judgment on which story is true, but it depends on the truth of what he writes.
Let's let this story play out a little bit.
All right.
So Morgan announced that a local newspaper publisher, David Cade Miller, had given him a sizable advance for the work. Miller is said to have received the entered apprentice degree, the first degree of masonry, but had been stopped from advancement by objections of Batavia Lodge members. So Miller is the guy that runs the press that's going to print Morgan's stuff. He kind of got in, but got kicked out pretty much immediately. He made the first degree.
All right.
So he promised Morgan 1/4 of the profits, and the financial backers of the venture were Miller, John Davids, who was Morgan's landlord, and Russell Dyers. They entered into a $500,000 penal bond with Morgan to guarantee its publication.
That's like $1 trillion today. That's ridiculous.
Like they're gonna print this thing.
Oh my gosh.
And this part, there's nobody argues about this part. Like there was a deal. It was a big deal. He was going to write this. It was going to be in this guy's paper.
This is early 1880s.
Yes. This is the 1820s.
I want to look up while you talk. I'm going to look up what $500,000 was in 1825.
Okay. Now, since Masons placed their hands on a Bible and promised not to reveal, placed their hands on a Bible and promised not to reveal the passwords and grips of the degrees, several members of the Batavia Lodge published an advertisement denouncing Morgan for breaking his word by authoring the book. So that tells me they're really worried about it. They actually took out an ad, like trying to...
They said he broke his word.
Yep.
So he's a member.
Like, you should, which is even weirder. Like, he's going to write a tell-all thing, and they're like, you shouldn't listen to him because he broke his promise to us to not tell our secrets. So don't read the thing that tells our secrets. Like, that's a really weird approach.
Yeah, this is, oh my gosh, nothing ever changes. I love how we have such foresight when we look back on conspiracy theories, but this stuff still happens today.
Yep.
People talk out both sides of their mouth. They're like, he's not a member, but also he's breaking his agreement not to talk about this stuff.
Yep.
By the way, I looked it up. $500,000 in 1825, $13 million. So it's not the end of the world.
It's a pretty big book advance.
That's a big
expose advance.
That's a lot of that's a lot of. I was thinking it would be some like ungodly sum though, you know.
And it is basically a book. I think I said it's going in the paper. It's the guy that owns a paper, but it's a book.
Yeah.
So an attempt also, along with the ad that was written to try and denounce Morgan, an attempt was also made to set fire to Miller's newspaper office and print shop. So somebody's really upset that this thing is getting ready to happen.
God, bro, it's just random people. It's just a coincidence.
So on September 11th, 1826, Morgan was arrested for supposed non-payment of a loan and allegedly stealing a shirt and tie.
Dude, I almost wonder. I know we are live recording, but I almost wonder if you really got deep into research if stealing a shirt and tie isn't some code word. If that, because that's such an extreme, that's such a weird thing.
It's property. It's literally just property theft. That's no.
You stole a shirt and a tie.
Yes, I looked.
Just had friends put $13 million into his account.
Yep.
Okay.
So, according to the laws of the time, he could be held in debtor's prison until restitution was made for the shirt and tie and the debt, which would have made it more difficult to publish his book. Morgan was jailed, and when Miller learned of this, he went to the jail to pay the debt and secure Morgan's release. Okay. Morgan was released, but then was rearrested and charged with supposedly failing to pay a $2 tavern bill. So just people are making up stuff, is what's happening.
It's Masons. Some guy owned a shirt and tie store, and he's like, you know what? I think he stole a shirt and tie, and then I
remember the story is actually like that he stole it off of somebody's like clothesline or something.
For real though?
Yeah.
Like I don't know this guy, but you're going around stealing one shirt and one tie off a person's clothesline, and then you get paid off that. Then a bartender goes, you know what? If I think about it, there was a beer he never paid for. This is suspicious as hell, man.
So he's back in jail on the $2 bill. Simpler times.
Yeah.
So while the jailer...
Let's times that we just found out that $500,000 is $13 million, so times 2 times 26. That's a $52 bar tab. I might be mad about that if I was.
So, coincidentally, the jailer just happened to go away for a little bit and leave the jail. But his wife was there. And a group of men stopped by and convinced his wife to release Morgan. They walked to a waiting carriage with Morgan, which arrived 2 days later at Fort Niagara. Shortly afterwards, Morgan disappeared. Now, there are conflicting accounts of what actually happened next to Morgan. The generally accepted version of the events is that Morgan was taken in a boat to the middle of the Niagara River and thrown overboard, where he presumably drowned, since he was never seen again in the community. Another version of events had Morgan being paid a large sum of money to simply disappear and give up publication of his book. In 1848, Henry L. Valance allegedly confessed on his deathbed to taking part in Morgan's murder, a tale recounted in Chapter 2 of Reverend C.G. Finney's Anti-Masonic book, The Character, Claims, and Practical Workings of Freemasonry, which was written in 1869. So, but in October of 1827, a badly decomposed body washed up on the shores of Lake Ontario. Now, many had presumed it to be Morgan, and the body was buried as his. However, there was a wife of a missing Canadian man named Timothy Monroe, positively identified the clothing on the body as which had been worn by her husband at the time of his disappearance. Okay. One group of Freemasons denied that Morgan was killed, saying that they paid him $500 to leave the country. Dude has a $500,000 book deal right now.
I'm trying to do this times 26 math, so that would be $13,000. Would you leave the country right now for $13,000?
No.
Especially if you have if you had a $500,000, if you had a $13 million book deal, would you leave the country for $13,000?
Or at least a deal that if it doesn't get made, you're getting paid that much. You're going to make some money though, regardless. He's got a portion of the profits coming from the book. Anyway, so maybe he was paid.
I mean, I could believe that the body wasn't his, but the thing about talking about stuff that happened 200 years ago is that it's possible that the rumor that they dumped him overboard started after they found the body.
Yeah.
And so we read this stuff ahistorically, but it sounds like the official historical version at least includes Masons taking him out of jail because the wife of the jailer let them do that, which is this is like the original Epstein, basically.
It kind of sounds like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like, what's going on in this jail?
Yep. There was another report that Morgan was seen later, including, like, there were a bunch of reports, supposedly, that he was seen in other countries, but none of the reports were ever confirmed. Eventually, though, Eli Bruce, the sheriff of Niagara County, and a Mason, was removed from office and tried for his involvement in Morgan's disappearance. He ended up serving 28 months in prison after being convicted of conspiracy for his role in kidnapping Morgan and holding him against his will before his disappearance.
I was going to say, is this guy a Mason? I didn't want to sound crazy. And he literally is.
He was a Mason.
Oh, wow.
He was, in fact, a Mason. So, there were three other Masons, Lowton Lawson, Nicholas Chesebro, and Edward Sawyer, who were also convicted of taking part in the kidnapping, and they served sentences as well. Other Batavia Masons were tried but acquitted. Author Jasper Ridley suggests that Morgan was probably killed by local Masons, as all scenarios are highly improbable. Yeah. Historian H. Paul Jeffers also considers this to be the more credible explanation.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's kind of what I think happened. They tried to put him in jail. It seemed like that was just a way to hold him till they could figure out what to do with him. Then he got back out real quick, and they're like, well, if he's going to get out real quick, people are going to bail him out. Let's just kill him. Yeah. Like, because they were mad. He's, like, writing this. He's getting ready to make a bunch of money off their secrets is the way they're seeing it.
The best way to piece apart a conspiracy is to ask, like, what makes sense in reality. Like, just use your BS detector.
Yeah.
If he really wasn't a member of the Masons, they would not have published a newspaper article saying he's displaying our secrets. If you just wanted to pay him to go away and the authorities in charge of him being in jail were on board with you, you could have just paid him to go away, and you could have said, we reached an arrangement, and he's decided now to go pursue a life in Canada or whatever.
Yeah.
It's everything happens in secret. The only thing you know is that dude showed up in the night, took him out of jail, just Epstein style, and he's vanished. And you never hear the dude who would have the motivation to write a book exposing all the Freemason stuff, he never did anything else in his life. He never decided to write a book about this or that, or
he had a couple. He had other stuff he wrote. Nothing like that.
After? No, I'm saying after. No, so he's an author, and you say, well, we just said leave the country, which is a weird thing for a secret society to do. But I'm saying, like, he never wrote another book after that. So their official story is he moved. We just paid him to move.
We gave him $500, and he lived off that forever.
He lived off that forever. And also the guy who's wrote books about multiple subjects, who makes his living off writing books, never wrote a book again.
Nope.
Interesting. And we only gave him $13,000.
Yep.
They murdered the guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they murdered the guy.
They murdered the guy.
I wanted to set out all possibilities, but because that's what got said. But yeah, that dude got killed immediately.
Their version is BS. I mean, let's say
if they didn't kill him before they threw him in the river, they killed him by strapping a bunch of bricks to his leg and drowning him.
Yeah, or he's in the bottom of a temple somewhere that nobody goes into because we're all Freemasons.
That's possible too.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. Soon after Morgan disappeared like this, Miller, he went ahead and published the book.
Ooh.
So, getting rid of Morgan accomplished nothing. It actually became a bestseller because of the notoriety of the events surrounding his disappearance. The Freemasons actually made it more popular by killing him. So Miller did not say that Morgan had been murdered, but that he had been carried away. Accounts circulated of Morgan having assumed a new identity and settling in Albany, Canada, or the Cayman Islands, where he was said to have been hanged as a pirate. New York Governor DeWitt Clinton, also a Mason, offered a $1,000 reward for information about Morgan's whereabouts, but it was never claimed. The circumstances of Morgan's disappearance and the minimal punishment received by his kidnappers caused public outrage, and he became a symbol of the rights of free speech and free press. Protests against Freemasons took place in New York and neighboring states. Masonic officials disavowed the actions of the kidnappers, but all Masons were under a cloud of suspicion. Thurlow Weed, a New York politician, gathered discontented opponents of President Andrew Jackson, a Mason, if you'll remember from a couple episodes ago, into the Masonic into the anti-Masonic Party, which gained the support of such notable politicians as William H. Seward and Millard Fillmore. So in the 1928 campaign, other Jackson rivals, including John Quincy Adams, who was president at the time, joined in denouncing the Masons.
You mean 1828?
Oh, what did I say?
1928.
Yeah, 1828. Sorry.
Yeah.
John Quincy Adams was not alive during the Great Depression. So, sorry about that. In 1832, the anti-Masonic Party fielded William Wirt as its presidential candidate and Amos L. Maker as his running mate, and they received 7 electoral votes from Vermont. By 1835, the party had begun falling apart, though, and dying off everywhere except Pennsylvania, as other issues, such as slavery, became the focus of national attention. So modern conspiracists such as Nesta Webster and William Guy Carr believed the methods of the Illuminati as described in Proofs of a Conspiracy were copied by radical groups throughout the 19th and 20th centuries in their subversion of benign organizations. Spiritual Counterfeits Project editor Tal Brook has compared the views of Proofs of a Conspiracy with those found in Carroll Quigley's Tragedy and Hope. Brooks suggests that the New World Order, which Robertson believed Adam Weishaupt, founder of the Illuminati, had in part accomplished through the infiltration of Freemasonry, will now be completed by those holding sway over the international banking system by means of the Rothschild banks, the U.S. Federal Reserve, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank.
All the people who tried to kill FDR.
Yep. Another thing that we talked about a little while back. In the plot to overthrow FDR, I think that might have been single-digit episodes.
Yeah.
So to tie it back into last week a little bit more, you remember Giuseppe Mazzini?
Here he comes. The Italian guy who pretty much started the Spanish-American War is what I remember. Yeah.
You'll also remember him as our boy Albert Pike's world domination pen pal Mason in America.
They wrote those letters, and they described in 1870 World War I and World War II and the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. And these are real documents.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, as you'll remember, Mazzini was a 33rd degree Freemason, a British intelligence agent, a revolutionary terrorist, and we didn't get into all this. He was the founder of Young Europe and Young Italy. Yeah, no, we did talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Which was a network of revolutionary groups designed to cause chaos around the world, which eventually grew to include Young America, Young Russia, Young Bosnia, Young Turks, and B'nai B'rith. I think I said that right.
Do you think the Young Turks, like the YouTube channel, it knows what they're saying?
I don't know that I thought about that when I read that, and I'm not sure.
Their main guy is Cenk Uber, and Cenk Cenk, and the thing with Turkish is it's C sound like J, so I think he is Turkish.
Then I would assume he probably knows what that is.
He would have to be. I mean, he's a pretty smart guy. He'd have to be aware of what he's naming his show after.
So I don't know how to take that. Process that as you will.
Okay.
A copy of Giuseppe Mazzini's book, The Duties of Man, resides at the Great Lodge of the Great East of Italy and was given to Grand Master Stefano Bizzi. Mazzini had understood that Freemasonry was a powerful lever which led to revolutionize the with which to revolutionize the world. So while he was attending Genoa University, Mazzini became a 33rd degree Mason and joined a secret organization known as the Carbonari. Carbonari, as they describe themselves in 1818, is, quote, our final aim is that Voltaire and of the French Revolution, the complete annihilation of Catholicism and ultimately all Christianity.
All right, there we go.
This is our boy. He's in with them. He's a Mason as well as these Carbonaris. It should be noted that Mazzini came from a Calvinist, preordained, Chosenite God people sect, the Jansenites. Sorry. So this particular group of supremacists held to a warped belief in
efficacious grace.
Thank you. I'm like, I know how to say it, but it's not coming out. Which stressed that only a certain portion of humanity were predestined to be saved and go to heaven.
That's a Calvinist idea.
Yes.
It's kind of gross.
And that's what Calvinists believe. This is a more, I don't know, they're even stricter about it, I guess.
Yeah, it basically says you don't have free will. Like, some people are created to be destroyed.
But I'm not sure what the Jansius necessarily believe that's more specific within Calvinist beliefs. They are Calvinists, but they call themselves this other thing.
Well, so, it's a philosophical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a theory of predestination. Man was either saved or damned according to God's own will, regardless of his merits or demerits.
Right.
Mazzini wrote to David Stern, quote, I am not a Christian.
And he's basically not if he believes that. I mean, What he's saying is that you can't, there's no such thing as accepting Jesus Christ as your savior to be saved. You're screwed no matter what you do. Yeah.
It's an interesting set of beliefs. I know some people that are Calvinists.
Yeah, well, I mean, Calvinism is basically that extreme, but this seems like Calvinism on steroids, basically, because Calvinists will say, well, anyone who accepts them was predestined to accept them, and anyone who didn't was predestined not to. This person is saying, like, even if you do accept him, you might be sent to hell, basically.
So
Yeah.
And so obviously Mazzini thinks him and his family, his ilk, are in. Oddly though, his father, Giacomo Mazzini, was a Jacobin though. In 1831, Mazzini was exiled to France, where he founded the Young Societies movement, which included the Young Italy, Young England, etc. This group united those who wanted to achieve unification through force.
Workers of the world unite.
Yep.
Yeah, this is your early college socialist movements.
Basically, kind of. But very, very radical and willing to start some wars and just, they're all out. So after Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, ended up dying in November in 1830, Mazzini ended up being appointed as the organization's head in 1834 instead of Johann Baudet, who was, if you remember back, was originally like primed to get it. I'm not sure that could have been its own kind of spin-off thing into what happened there. And we would have to go into who Johann Bode is. And anyway, what really matters is Giuseppe Mazzini, who was Albert Pike's pen pal, is now the head of it all in Europe.
Huh.
So Mazzini then moves to England in 1837 and spends 11 years before returning to Italy in 1848 to lead the revolution there against the Austrians. And again, after that, he was exiled. Lord Broman called Mazzini the head of the assassination department in Rome. So England was, in Mazzini's own words, quote, my real home, if I have any. One of Mazzini's most authoritative biographers, Dennis Mack Smith, recounts the pleasure of philosopher and economist John Stuart Mill experienced in September 1837 at getting to meet Mazzini. Quote, celebrated Mazzini, the most eminent conspirator and revolutionist now in Europe, and the most accomplished and in every way superior foreigner he had thus far known. Just a good guy. He's just a good guy. Just like this guy. He's overthrowing governments. There's a great party. Just a lot of fun to be around.
John Stuart Mill is a big deal.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm like this. And he thought he was a fan of Mazzini.
And he complimented him as a conspirator?
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
So in 1848, the group known as Hate Vente Romain led the activities of most of Europe's secret societies. In April 1836, the Hot of the Vote, whose pseudonym was Nubius, wrote to Beppo, who was another pseudonym within their organization, about Mazzini and his true Luciferian and I am God nature. Nubius wrote, Mazzini behaves too much like a conspirator of melodrama to suit the obscure role we resign ourselves to play until our triumph. Mazzini likes to talk about a great many things, about himself above all. He never ceases writing that he is overthrowing thrones and altars, that he fertilizes the people, that he is the prophet of humanitarianism. So they don't like him.
Yeah.
They're a secret society, and they don't like that he's like kind of a celebrity. He's kind of the John Gotti of conspiracy stuff.
Right. I like humanitarianism at that point was used to basically mean secular humanism. Yes. He's kind of like the I don't know who, like Richard Dawkins, or who are these like four horsemen of the atheism or whatever people talk about. Like he's kind of this. This makes me think more that there's a split going on. There's people who believe in God, who say, you know, we're going to come together to do this Mason thing, and then there's people who are like using it to do this weird secular atheist Luciferian thing.
It does, doesn't it?
It's like some of the Masons are like, oh, you keep talking about, because this guy was a big deal with Albert Pike. So knowing there's some people in Europe who are saying like this guy's full of crap, like, you know, it makes it sound like there's like a war going on inside of Freemasonry.
And that may be because lodges, to some extent, they claim to operate independently. They're united, but they're also doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So I guess you could have ones that don't do a lot of this stuff, but they still, I don't know, there's a lot of ritualistic stuff that they all do. And so it's at what point do you draw the line between, well, you're doing occult stuff and you're not, based on whether or not you want world domination? That isn't really the dividing line.
No, I think the problem is with any secret society as opposed to a church, which is public, is that the secret people are always going to rise to the top. Like Albert Pike said, they will take people from any lodge who reach a certain level who want to form their. So it's like you can join a secret society and it could be all good in your local lodge, but you're just a feeding ground for something bigger and more evil. And it's like that's the exact opposite with any church, is that it gets more and more public the higher it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. So, after young Italy gangs forced Pope Pius IX to flee Rome, Mazzini
I've
was.
never heard about that.
Oh, yeah, that was the thing.
They forced a pope to flee Rome. Okay.
Yeah. And Mazzini was installed with British backing as one of the Papal States dictators from March to June in 1849.
Okay.
Okay. For the next 3 decades, the prime ministers of Italy would be Mazzini's British agents. All of Mazzini's young movements were designed to balkanize Europe into Catholic and Protestant divide and conquer lines. He would also encourage extreme nationalism along ethnic lines and throw fuel on the fire. For example, he supported Hungarian national aspirations from Austria, but then got Romania and Hungary feuding over multi-ethnic Transylvania. But international control was Mazzini's real dream.
So he's stirring up stuff inside countries to create international governance.
Yeah, because eventually, if everybody's at war, like it would be better for everything to just come together, right? Because there's this big problem. Somebody's got to come in and
Right.
take over everything and bring order to all this lawlessness.
Well, I've never heard this described in this way or with historical context. So, but what I've heard for a long time from conspiracy theorist friends that I have is that the goal is to create, because this didn't used to make sense to me. The goal is to create as much conflict among people, race, religion, ideology inside of a country so that the only thing anyone has in common is the most baseline, we're all people, we all like knowledge, we all like, and then you use that, you create this conflict to make us all base. We like sex, we like drugs, we like to feel good, we like, you know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
create like the most baseline humanity by making everyone fight against each other. So
Yeah. Now, the Young America version of Mazzini's New World Order view pushed free trade, internationalism, manifest destiny, and American exceptionalism, imperialism, and an early iteration of neoliberalism. This was called the Market Revolution.
yep, that's a historical event.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Charles.
we're still under this, by the way.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
The defining, that's part of the reason. Never mind. Keep going on.
Charles Greer Sellers, a leading historian of the market revolution, portrays it as a highly negative development that marked the triumph of capitalism over democracy. It was led by Stephen Douglas, James K. Polk, Franklin Pierce, and the New York Rothschild financier and manipulator August Belmont. Sellers observes, quote, while dissolving deeply rooted patterns of behavior and belief for competitive effort, it mobilized collective resources throughout government to fuel growth in countless ways, not least by providing the essential legal, financial, and transport infrastructures, establishing capitalistic hegemony over economy, politics, and culture. The market revolution created ourselves and most of the world we know.
Yeah, neoliberalism.
Yep. Giuseppe Mazzini, the Chosenite, was upfront about the whole scheme. Quote, we aspire to corrupt in order to govern. We have taken from the people all the gods of heaven and earth, their religious faith, their faith in monarchy, their honesty, and their family virtues. That's it.
I'm just sad. Now I'm just
I'm gonna
sad.
stop there. I decided I would end on possibly the lowest note of the entire episode.
It's an interesting decision. I agree with it though. I would encourage our listeners to think really hard about these goals. And we've talked about these in a few episodes, including your last Freemason episode
Yep.
and my episodes on the MJ12, etc. That whatever the secret group is, they aspire to, quote, corrupt to govern, take from the people all the gods of heaven and earth, and their faith, and to corrupt honesty and family virtues. I mean, how could you look at the world the way it is right now and not think that whether or not they did it, this is what happened?
I'm assuming they have a mission accomplished banner on some sort of an aircraft carrier somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And they
Yeah.
mean it.
They did
And
mean
they
it.
mean it.
I mean, oh my gosh. But also, it's so funny. So those were his own words, right? I mean, that's a historic source that you were using.
Yep.
So they act like if you join, you got to believe in the supreme creator and all this stuff, but they really just want to destruct. It's Satanism.
Yeah, I believe that quote is actually from his book.
Yeah, it's Satanism. They literally believe that.
Because much like Albert Pike, he was pretty upfront in his writing about like what he thought and what he believed, and like it's very confusing how anybody could read anything either one of them did and go, "Oh, you guys definitely aren't like Satanists trying to overthrow the world." Like they were both like, "Nah, like Lucifer's awesome, also world domination."
Well, I can understand it actually, having read Albert Pike's book. I can understand. Really? I can understand how people could be confused because it's very long. It's hundreds of pages. It starts out basically being like, all we believe, and he does it by the levels. So he's indoctrinating you through the levels of his books. And then the first part, it's just saying all we believe in is this. And he literally rewrites the 10 Commandments in his own language. And it's like, respect old people, obey laws, be kind. And that's chapter 1. And by the time you get to chapter, 16, 17, 18, by the time you get into the 20s, he's saying he's doing nothing but writing a polemic about how Jesus Christ is nothing but a forgery from other religions, and it all goes back to the light bearer, and he's rewriting his own religion. But he starts out, I can understand how people could get sucked into this, is what I'm saying. Like, yeah, he's very smart. I think you said he spoke like 17 languages or something like that. Like,
yeah, I believe Albert Pike, it was like 16 or 17 different languages.
Yeah, he's a very smart guy. I could see how you can get sucked into it if you don't have a grounding. Yeah, wow. I don't know what to say, man. I'm starting to get freaked out. I might do a Freemasons episode pretty soon. I don't know.
There is so much stuff on them, and the Illuminati too. Like at some point, I really do want to get into Knights Templar and where the Illuminati kind of springs off from. Because much like we're finding, especially like with the government groups, it's just rebranding happens all the time. Like it's the same groups, they go by different names.
Yeah.
And I think it is for this purpose to confuse people on when things started and where it's coming from and where beliefs are coming from and all that.
Well, I keep going back in my own mind. I don't mean to, if I've said this a bunch of times, I'm sorry to the listeners, but I keep going back in my own mind that, for instance, this is secret history, right? It's a history of a conspiracy. Yeah. So when you look at regular history, people are always beating other people out in democratic contests or conquering this or changing this idea. All of this stuff is happening in the dark. So when you see it would only be natural, because it is human history, it's a story of man, that there are different groups and stuff taking power, but because it's secret, we don't have any idea knowing exactly when it happens or exactly what arguments were made. So yikes, dude. Even if this stopped 100 years ago, it's very disturbing what influence they might have had on history, because they have achieved their goal of basically destroying morality.
Oh, spoilers too. We could move up into the last 100 years, and there's Illuminati. There's a bunch of stuff there too. I just haven't gotten to that yet.
Yeah, well, I hope we get into it,
But at some point, I would like to kind of go back, because you get into the Knights Templar, that goes back to like the 1400s. Like it's really old history at that point. But at some point, it'll be good for context to kind of understand where all these different things are kind of springing from.
Right.
As that kind of does, they have a lot of weird connections on a lot of different places. So, but yeah, this is where it seems like I at this point believe the Freemasons were probably just more of a social club maybe not just that at the point when the Illuminati took over, but I think by and large they were pretty much just a social group at that point, and then they kind of got radicalized in this revolutionary period in history where kind of everybody was getting radicalized one way or another, basically.
Right. That would make sense since Albert Pike rewrote all those things.
Yeah,
whatever he rewrote probably wasn't as Luciferian. I mean, he had to have added his own ideas.
Yeah. But I still think there was some occult element to what was already going on there. They were doing ritual stuff. Like, it may have not been as blatant, but I don't think it was still probably anything that would coexist with Christianity well.
Right. I think I see this as something like someone who uses a Ouija board. Like, you could be a Christian and you say, oh, I want to buy a Ouija board and have fun with my friends or whatever. And it might stop there. You might do it once and that's fine. But then there might come a time where something comes in and it becomes a whole thing. Yeah. It becomes a whole belief, I'm going to believe. So I see this as kind of similar to that. Like, you have a secret society that's kind of like, we're not Catholic, we're not Christian, we're not, we're just doing our own thing. And that, like, opens a doorway for evil things to come in eventually. And then just over a couple hundred years, it's like, well, obviously you're going to become something evil over time. You can't do things in secret and disavow religion and stuff and not expect something evil to come in eventually.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So that is our part 2 on Freemasons.
You're kicking butt, man. I love it. I love this. I hope this future parts,
I think there probably could be. At some point, like I said, I want to do what will just be probably YouTube and Facebook content of their symbology and the weird things that Albert Pike wrote about, because a lot of it isn't just Albert Pike, but he came up with a lot of it when he wrote everything on what their symbols mean. But yeah, a lot of weird it's basically all either like satanic, occult, or sex stuff in their symbolism. That's pretty much what it's all about. Sex and the devil.
Yeah, that's baseline. What's interesting is, so this episode has been about the Illuminati taking over the Freemasons. The Italian guy who wrote the letters to Albert Pike was part of the Illuminati taking over the Freemasons, which is why he wrote the news text.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. I'm almost mad that these words are considered like conspiracy wrong things to say in society. I'm almost upset. It's almost mad that if you say the word Illuminati, it's like a joke.
Yeah. Well, that's what they were going for.
Yeah. Huh.
I think they've done a good job of influencing it that way.
You did a great job, man. Thank you.
Oh. Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. Like, rate, subscribe, do all the things that help us out. We appreciate it. Let us know what you think about all the new stuff we're doing, and we'll be back next week with something new. Thank you all so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.